Hello everyone, this is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm here again with Gregory and Nagy, with Sarah, Janet, and Hélène for HeroesX Office Hours for version 10. Our hours for discussion this time are hours 20 and 21, the plays of Euripides, the two that we read, Hippolytus and the Bacchae. Let me just jump right into the questions. In the Hippolytus of Euripides, the chorus of women interacts with Phaedra in a variety of ways. Do you find a consistent pattern in the interaction? And for the Bacchae, in the Bacchae of Euripides, how is the kleos of Pentheus similar to the kleos of Achilles in the Iliad? But back to the chorus of Hippolytus. Do you find a consistent pattern in the interaction of the chorus with Phaedra? And right off the bat, I think we should also offer some encouragement to the participants, because this is a week late that we're doing these questions, because it's getting to that time of the semester where things are seeming to be very long and drawn out, and it's all piling up.
Yes, I'm sure that some of you might feel overwhelmed by the beauty and by the intensity of these readings, and it's easy to fall behind. I fall behind all the time because I get so excited about any one of these beautiful passages, for example. But the thing is not to be discouraged and to keep reading ahead, and it'll all work out.
Mm-hmm. Plenty of time. The course does, or the project does run a few extra weeks once we actually reach hour 24, and well, there's always next spring.
So courage. And that said, let's have a look at what our readers have to say, our participants, about this not so easy question, which might be another source of getting people overwhelmed.
That's true.
These were not easy questions.
Yeah, there was one comment from a participant about what about if the chorus is showing or talking about what cannot be seen on stage, and that Phaedra is experiencing.
Yes.
So.
You know, Hélène, even after having read this play, this drama so many times, I've often wondered, how do I imagine the age of these women who are being empathetic with Phaedra? And I used to think, well, maybe it's women. Then I thought at another point, maybe they're girls. Now I think they're kind of both, that there is a big range of female experiences that can't be pinned down to any one age class. What do you think of that comment? Does that help maybe supplement what our participant is saying?
Yes, and what's even more interesting is that the chorus was played by young and older men.
Yes, which is also problematic, considering that Euripides, who's such a good anthropologist, is actually giving us an idea of how this song might really be sung and danced in real life, which is in a local festival, such as the festival in Trozen. You can imagine young girls actually singing and dancing the story of Phaedra and Hippolytus in the ritual context of initiation, because singing and dancing, of course, would be a ritual context. And then if you transfer that to Athens, well, now it's young men or boys or however you imagine the chorus, but definitely male performers, because that's how it has to be done in Athens, reenacting what female initiates do in a small town across the Gulf, across the Saronic Gulf. It's pretty amazing.
So you're talking here, Greg, about the rituals of unmarried girls who then offer a lock of their hair. While you were talking, I was thinking Phaedra's situation is, she is not an unmarried young girl, and yet she's wanting almost to act as if she were.
Yes.
So is that maybe why we've got this ambiguity in the role of the chorus as well?
I love that. I love that. Well, I can't tell. In other words, even if Phaedra is imagined as a newlywed or fairly newlywed woman, she could still have unmarried attendants. I always think of that weird moment in the Iliad when Helen says, "Oh, I really miss my chorus mates." In other words, back in Sparta, I was the prima donna, prima ballerina of a chorus, and how I miss those girls. And I have a sense that there she's talking about attendants or younger females who are circling around her, and there I can imagine them being unmarried. So I don't know. You know, there was one time when the late Nicole Laurent and I were working on a project, and she came up and visited Holly and me in New Hampshire. This was during one of her big visits to Harvard, and there was a long weekend. I remember it snowed, and there were the three of us, and we were just talking about everything on Greek civilization. She's the first person, I mentioned this in a footnote in the book, Ancient Greek Heroes in 24 Hours, The Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours, that I owe it to her, this observation that nowhere else in classical Greek poetry is menstruation ever mentioned. Now, of course, we can't count, I don't know, prose treatises by gynecologists. That doesn't count. I'm talking about poetry. And that choral passage at the beginning is the only place where there's a reference to menstruation. But then the more I compared notes with people who are experts in, I don't know, gynecology, it turns out that today people would say that the symptoms that are being described could be PMS as well. So it's not just menstruation. It could be just being out of sorts at any stage in a woman's life. And if that's the case, and maybe even menopause, then it'd be very typical of women's songs in general, which tend to go back and forth in the experiences of a woman's life, not necessarily in chronological order. So I don't know. My latest take is that I can't date the age of the chorus, so to speak. It's so fluid. And it makes it even more beautiful and interesting. It's any stage in a woman's life, any stage. And Artemis would be in charge of any stage except for sex. That's the one thing where it's Aphrodite. And the strange complementarity that we have between Aphrodite and Artemis, somehow that also has some kind of a role in this very weird chorus at the beginning. I say very weird because it's so hard to figure out.
Another participant mentioned that chorus is acting as a mediator between the audience and characters in the play.
Yes, yes. But then if it's the audience, here's where Greg will use the word notional. Technically or notionally, the audience of Athenian State Theater is men only. Then what kind of a civic lesson is this to delve so intimately into the private feelings of not a woman, but women in general, where there's a big range. I think it's so typical of Euripides to be such a smart psychologist and anthropologist and poet. He's just everything, isn't he? I haven't really answered my own question, have I? So no wonder our participants are a little bit overwhelmed. If the questioner can't answer his own questions, then we're dealing with something very serious. But that's what tragedy is. It's something so serious. You know, when young people come up to me and say, "Can you define tragedy for me?" I say, "I can't. I just have to read all the tragedies." Yeah, tragedy is life.
Perfect. Tragedy is life. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Anything else for this discussion thread?
Well, we just have to keep coming back to this again and again. Let's tackle the other one on the Bacchae. Not that we'll have an easier time here. This one is even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, here I am asking, what does the kleos of Pentheus and the kleos of Achilles, what do those two instances of kleos have in common? And it's mostly they're different from each other. So they're 95% different on making up that proportion, only 5% similar. And so again, I'm putting a lot of pressure on our participants. I didn't mean to overwhelm them. So can we talk about what our participants might be thinking, even if they're reluctant to engage with that question?
Yeah, but there's the question that he is larger than life.
Yeah.
That yeah, and the vocabulary used for Pentheus, you know, he deserves. He suffered a great Pentheus, and he's cut into pieces.
Thank you.
So you know, he deserves.
I think Elaine hit the nail on the head. It's that connection with sorrow. There he is, Mr. Sorrow, Pentheus, and Achilles has a name that is also directly related to the two big sorrow words, achos and penthos, which are not only sorrow, but expression of sorrow in lament. So yes, I think Elaine nailed it. It's what they have most in common is that sorrow. How they experience what they experience, that's where they're so different. Achilles doesn't get ripped apart by his mother and his aunts. That's very different. And Achilles doesn't persecute Dionysus. Achilles isn't threatened by how shall I say it, people who want to shake up society. He shakes up society by challenging Agamemnon. So there's so many differences. We could talk forever about the differences. But thank you, dear Elaine. There it is. It's the sorrow.
Yes, that's a comment from a participant. I must admit that the participant nailed it very well. I mean, you know.
So this one is maybe not as overwhelming as the other question. Yeah.
Yes, but it's still difficult to get the notion of the heroic kleos. I mean, you know, because this is a different kind of kleos.
Yeah. And another thing that defamiliarizes the situation is that it's Dionysus himself, the god of theater, who says, "You, Pentheus, you will get a kleos. But first you have to die. First you have to be dismembered."
That's part of the kleos, isn't it? You have to die to become a hero. You don't get the kleos unless you're a hero. Another thing that a participant has mentioned is that antagonistic relationship.
Yeah.
That is another of those defining things about a hero.
And if we were talking in the presence of the great Nietzsche, I think he would approve of the fact that in the case of Pentheus, his divine antagonist is Dionysus. In the case of Achilles, his divine antagonist is Apollo. And of course, Dionysus and Apollo are very complementary for Nietzsche. Therefore, shouldn't Pentheus and Achilles also be complementary for Nietzsche? I don't think anybody asked him that question, but in his honor, we can ask that question.
I'm thinking kleos doesn't anymore refer to epic specifically,
No.
right? Homeric epic uses kleos to refer to its own genre.
And thank you, dear Keith, because I think of the fact that in Sappho, kleos is used with reference to the medium of Sappho, presumably, also in Ibycus, that lyric master. Kleos is, there it's even more clear that kleos is a self-reference by lyric to lyric, unlike Iliad 9:4-13, where kleos is a reference by epic to epic.
So here in tragedy, is it also a self-reference? Would you say it's a tragedy?
I think so. I think so. And with tragedy, okay, I don't really want to call it lyric. It's a medium of and by itself, but it's certainly not epic.
Mm-hmm. But there's also the aspect of ritual reenactment in
Yes.
in the drama. So
Yes. And you see that, of course, much more clearly in tragedy, and it's very hard to spot in epic, because epic doesn't refer to itself, its exterior reality. That's a tough one.
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
In Achilles' case, hubris is not very clear, but in Pentheus' case, we can see it more clearly.
Yes, I agree. I agree that Pentheus is definitely hubristic. Achilles has his dark moments too. I think especially with his cruelty after the death of Patroclus. He does some very questionable things. And in my comments on Iliad 23, I finally came out saying to myself and to my readers that I think Achilles has corrupted the funeral of Patroclus by way of having human sacrifice. So I no longer think of the funeral of Patroclus as a successful funeral. The successful one, ironically, is the one that the Trojans arranged for Hector. There, I don't see anything wrong, ritually speaking, but I do see all sorts of things wrong with the funeral of Patroclus. One of the most shocking things, besides the fact that human sacrifice, is another fact, and that is that after all the slaughter that has happened, the slaughtering of the Trojans, the fleeing Trojans, by the pursuing Achaeans, especially the Myrmidons, who are the men of Achilles and Patroclus, don't bother to wash up. So they're still covered with gore when they're having their feast. That is really bad. That is just so much in violation of ritual correctness that in this world where ritual correctness is always a sign of moral correctness, something is very wrong. So I'm not going on an anti-Achilles tirade here. All I'm saying is that there are hubristic things about Achilles too, even in our Iliad.
They just take longer to unfold.
Yeah. And then he does fix it in Iliad 24. He fixes all the bad things he did in 23 and 22.
What else? Anything?
Well, maybe a slightly off-topic question, but we were talking about the role of the chorus in the Hippolytus, and the chorus in the Bacchae is also a chorus of women. Is this another aspect of women's experience?
Ooh, okay. I love to talk about that because I do think that the possession of somebody who is doing the rituals of Dionysus correctly is not madness. That is being in a good state of mind. And the way I look at it, the chorus in the Bacchae of Euripides are perfectly correct. And by the way, they dance perfectly. They sing and dance perfectly. It's our friend Pentheus, when he comes out, something is off about his costuming. He doesn't know how to do the motions. It's because he is a character in myth. And if myth is dysfunctional and if heroes resist Dionysus, then the possession of those heroes will be, how shall I say, incorrect, excessive, whereas the possession of the chorus, who are, can I say it this way, doing their job. They're singing and dancing as followers of Dionysus, and there's nothing they do that's excessive. There's nothing that is not moderate. So the perfect balance of wine and water at a perfect symposium, if we can imagine that, is what the chorus also reenacts as the perfect channelers of Dionysus. And that's because they're not only in the heroic past, they're also in the present time of the festival of Dionysus. And they're in fact reaffirming the proper worship of Dionysus. I used to say to people, this has to do with literary theory, where according to the theory, the more a genre or a form of verbal art becomes obsolescent, becomes destabilized, the more it has to keep referring to itself. Well, in a sense, that's what's happening in the late 5th century. There's the popular saying, what does this have to do with Dionysus? Tragedy has sort of gone off the rails. It's not really anymore about the persecution of Dionysus as the suffering righteous who then reasserts himself in the community. It's like, you know, when people think that Christ has gone out of Christmas, there are these somewhat extremist views to put Christ back into Christmas, put X back into Xmas. Well, the tragedy of the Bacchae, this thing that Euripides has produced, which is in a sense the last tragedy, it's the last one that we have in near complete form. It's like tragedy is calling attention to itself. We're still here. This is what tragedy is. This is what the essence of Dionysus is. Therefore, the chorus is extremely important as a self-definition. And I think they're perfectly okay. That was a long-winded response, dear Sarah, to, I thought, an extremely interesting and provocative observation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Provocative is good in our milieu, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was an interesting answer to this. What to think about.
Well, I think it's about time for us to wrap up for this week. So, it
was such a joy. It was really fun, and looking forward to some kind of a wind-up.
Next week, perhaps we'll do all 3 of the remaining questions next week. But
or if there are too many things still left to be tied together, we can see.
we'll see.
I want this never to end myself.
We'll just keep recycling.
So bye everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.